Let's talk about the moment an avoidant realizes they still want you. And it doesn't happen when you're arguing. It doesn't happen in the middle of the tension or the silence treatment or even the breakup. No, that moment almost always comes after. It comes in solitude, not conflict, and that's important to understand. Avoidantly attached people are wired to cope with emotional stress by withdrawing. When they feel overwhelmed, vulnerable, or afraid of closeness, their first instinct is to create distance. They retreat, they pull away, they build walls, and when they do, it can feel personal like rejection. But in their mind, it's not always about you. It's about safety, psychological safety, emotional control. They've learned sometimes from early experiences that closeness can lead to pain, so they run from it. And here's where it gets fascinating. While most people seek connection to soothe themselves after a conflict, avoidants do the opposite. They feel safer alone. So when the relationship gets hard or real, they lean into solitude, not because they don't care, but because caring too much terrifies them. But solitude is a double-edged sword, because when you're no longer reaching out, when you're no longer available, when you're no longer fighting to make it work, they start to feel something they've spent a lifetime avoiding: loss. And loss has a strange way of waking people up, especially people who thought they didn't need anyone. At first, the silence feels like control, peace, freedom, but that quiet slowly turns into an echo chamber, one that reflects back everything they've tried to suppress. Your absence becomes more tangible than your presence ever was. And it's in that moment, when they think you're really gone, that the realization hits: I still want them. But here's the part we don't talk about enough: how it happens. It's not a dramatic movie moment, it's not a grand epiphany. It's subtle, it creeps in. Maybe they walk past a coffee shop you loved, and for just a second, they pause. They remember your laugh, or they sit alone on a Friday night and scroll past a photo of someone that reminds them of you. And they feel it, that pang of recognition, that soft, uncomfortable truth. They miss you, not just the idea of you, but you. Your presence, your energy, the way you understood them, even when they couldn't explain themselves. The way you stayed, even when they gave you reasons not to. And that realization can shake them. Because for the first time, they have to confront something they've carefully avoided. The fact that their defense mechanisms, while protective, might also be destructive. That pulling away didn't bring peace, it brought regret. That distance didn't preserve the relationship, it ended it. And maybe for the first time in a long time, they feel something unfamiliar: desire without fear. The desire to reconnect, to reach out, to be vulnerable. But here's the challenge: that moment of realization doesn't always lead to immediate action. Because avoidants don't flip switches overnight. They process slowly, cautiously, internally, and often they wait too long. By the time they're ready to come back, you might have moved on. You might have grown. You might have healed. That's why I tell people, never mistake someone's silence for indifference. And never confuse emotional distance with the absence of love. Sometimes the people who push us away are the ones who care the most. They just don't know how to hold on without losing themselves. But that doesn't mean you wait around, because your worth isn't defined by someone else's timing. And love isn't about convincing someone to choose you. It's about choosing yourself enough to stop chasing those who need to lose you to value you. Still, that moment, when an avoidant realizes they want you, is real. It's raw, it's often hidden, but it's powerful, because it forces them to face something deeper than fear. It forces them to ask, what do I really want, and am I willing to grow to have it? So if you're listening to this right now, and you've been on the other end of someone's avoidance, don't take their distance as the full story. Take it as a mirror. Reflect on what you want, what you deserve, and if they come back, make sure it's not because you filled their silence, but because they finally had the courage to face it. Because in the quiet, we don't just lose people, we find clarity. And sometimes, that clarity is the most honest thing we'll ever hear. Imagine someone who seems cold and detached, almost as if there's an impenetrable wall between them and the world. It's easy to assume that emotional distance equals indifference or a lack of love. But here's the paradox. What if that very distance is a signal of a deeper, unspoken affection, a protective measure against vulnerability? When an avoidant starts to pull back, it often isn't because they've stopped caring. Rather, it's because they're terrified of feeling too much. For many of us, love is straightforward. We express it, we reach out, we share our vulnerabilities. But for those with avoidant tendencies, vulnerability is a risky investment. Their early experiences may have taught them that opening up invites hurt, so they develop strategies to shield themselves. This can mean shutting down, pulling away, or even creating excuses to avoid closeness. And when someone you love does that, the natural reaction might be to feel unloved or unwanted. Yet the truth is far more complex. At its core, emotional disconnection in avoidance isn't a calculated decision to withdraw affection. It's a survival mechanism, a way of navigating relationships when the stakes feel too high. Think about it. If you're constantly balancing on the edge of vulnerability, you might decide that it's safer to keep others at arm's length. But therein lies a fundamental misunderstanding. The real conflict isn't a lack of love. It's a fear of being overwhelmed by love. The avoidance is less about denying connection and more about protecting what feels too fragile inside. When you see someone acting distant or emotionally disengaged, consider that they might be wrestling with an inner turmoil. They might long for closeness, yet every time they get too near, the weight of possibility, of loss, of rejection cripples them. It's a quiet battle that plays out in subtle ways. They may laugh at your jokes or remember the meaningful moments you shared, but when it comes to fully embracing those feelings, their defenses kick in. It's as if their mind says, "I want this, but if I let it in completely, I'll lose myself." And so they inadvertently create a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more they distance themselves, the more it seems like they're withdrawing love, even though it's really the love they're struggling to contain. One of the most poignant aspects of this dynamic is that it challenges our conventional understanding of love. We often equate consistency with care and visible affection with commitment. Yet, in the case of the avoidant partner, their sporadic presence might be a patchwork of deep, seated emotions fighting to surface amid a sea of self-doubt. Their sporadic returns, those fleeting moments when they let their guard down, are not mere acts of contrition. They're revelations that underneath the layers of self-protection, a tender heart is still beating, a heart that craves connection as desperately as any other. This isn't to say that love in these circumstances is uncomplicated or without risk. In fact, the very act of coming face to face with one's emotional reality is a journey fraught with challenges. It means acknowledging that the behaviors cultivated to safeguard oneself may, paradoxically, be the very things that prevent true intimacy. It means understanding that emotional disconnection is not an absence, but rather a miscommunication, a language spoken in hushed tones of fear rather than in bold declarations of affection. And so, for those of us who find ourselves on the receiving end, there is a lesson worth embracing. Never conflate detachment with a complete lack of care. Instead, recognize that sometimes what appears as indifference might actually be a cry for help, a silent plea from a person caught in the tension between their desire for closeness and their overwhelming fear of vulnerability. This realization can transform how we interact with the avoidant partner. It invites us to approach the situation with empathy rather than frustration, It encourages us to seek understanding rather than to hastily judge. Knowing that emotional disconnection often masks an undercurrent of affection gives us a chance to create an environment where trust can slowly be rebuilt, where the avoidant can feel safe enough to dismantle their defenses piece by piece. In many ways, this insight is both a challenge and an invitation. It challenges us to rethink our assumptions about love and connection, and it invites us to act with a balance of compassion and self-respect, recognizing that while someone's retreat might signal an inner struggle, our own emotional needs are just as vital. It compels us to ask, are we prepared to extend understanding, or do we choose to protect our own hearts by accepting the superficial layer of detachment? Reflect on this. The next time you encounter someone who seems emotionally distant, consider that they might be silently screaming their need for connection. Look beyond the surface and see the love that's there, even if it's hidden beneath layers of fear. Here's the truth most people don't want to hear. Change doesn't start with comfort. It starts with loss, and for someone with avoidant tendencies, that loss is often the only thing powerful enough to crack through the emotional armor they've spent years, sometimes decades, building. You see, avoidants operate from a deeply ingrained belief that distance equals safety. They've learned, often from childhood, often without realizing it, that closeness is risky. That emotional intimacy opens the door to rejection, control, or even abandonment, so they become masters at self-protection. They don't talk about what hurts. They don't ask for what they need. And when things get too close, they shut down or disappear. But here's the thing, as long as you're there texting, checking in, trying to fix it, they don't have to face the consequences of their own patterns. Your presence becomes a cushion. It reinforces the belief that they can retreat as much as they want, and you'll still be waiting. They might feel confused, guilty even, but not enough to change, because they haven't felt the loss yet. It's not until they believe you're really gone, not just physically, but emotionally gone, that the internal alarm finally goes off. That's the moment when reality sets in, and it's jarring. Suddenly, the very thing they were trying to avoid feeling deeply is unavoidable. They have to sit with the silence, the absence, the impact of their own actions. And what's incredible is that many avoidants aren't even fully aware of what they've lost until there's nothing left to distract them. They start replaying the moments they dismissed. They remember your consistency, your presence, your patience. The way you stayed even when they made it hard to, and now they're sitting with the space you used to fill, trying to understand why they feel empty. This isn't just a romantic idea. It's backed by behavioral psychology. Real transformation rarely happens without disruption. The human brain is wired to seek comfort and predictability. As long as the avoidant feels they're in control of the narrative, they won't challenge it. But the loss of a safe, meaningful connection can be enough of a shock to interrupt those patterns. That moment of emptiness becomes the catalyst for reflection. And here's where it gets powerful. For many avoidants, this is the first time they're confronted with the truth that their coping strategies don't work anymore. That pushing people away doesn't lead to freedom. It leads to loneliness. That emotional detachment doesn't preserve peace. It erodes intimacy. And maybe for the first time, they start asking the hard questions. Why do I shut down? Why does closeness scare me? Why do I miss this person so much when I was the one who walked away? This is the breaking point, the turning point. And it's not just about missing you. It's about facing themselves. Because underneath the grief is a deeper realization. If they want connection, they have to risk connection. That means learning how to communicate, how to self-regulate, how to let someone in without running the moment things get real. But let me be clear. Just because someone realizes they want you back doesn't mean they've changed. The realization is only the beginning. Growth takes effort. It takes time. It takes a level of emotional responsibility most avoidants have spent years avoiding. And you can't do that work for them. You can't drag someone into self-awareness. What you can do is step back long enough for the discomfort of losing you to become their mirror. And if they do come back, and some will, it's important to listen not just to what they say, but to what they do. Are they taking accountability? Are they reflecting or just reacting to the pain of being alone? Are they building new habits or repeating old cycles with better words? That's where discernment matters, because wanting someone isn't the same as being ready to love them well. So if you're in the middle of this, if you've stepped back from someone who keeps shutting down, know this: your distance may be the only thing that creates the space for them to grow. Not because you're punishing them, but because you're choosing yourself. You're allowing reality to do what your words couldn't. Sometimes love means letting someone feel the consequences of their fear, not out of anger, but out of clarity, because we all deserve a love that doesn't just want us in our absence, but chooses to show up in our presence.